I started going to the laundromat on Maple Street because it was quiet. That wasn't the official reason, of course. Officially, it was closer than the one near campus. The machines worked better. The coffee place next door sold decent Americanos. But really, it was the quiet. Sunday mornings were the slowest. Just the low hum of dryers turning in slow circles, the faint smell of detergent, and the occasional thud when someone dropped a basket. It made the week feel paused. I'd sit at the small plastic table near the window with a paper cup of coffee and my phone in front of me, not really doing anything with it. Sometimes I'd scroll halfway through a message and stop. Sometimes I'd type something like, "Hey, it's been a while," then stare at it, then delete it. You learn little habits when you're alone a lot. I'd fold my laundromat receipt into smaller and smaller squares without noticing, or spin the cardboard sleeve around my coffee cup until the seam lined up perfectly with the logo. That morning was the first time I noticed her. Or maybe she'd been there before, and I just hadn't paid attention. She was standing near the older machines along the back wall, the ones that always rattled louder than the others. Mid-40s, maybe a little older. Dark hair pulled loosely back. A light gray sweater that looked soft enough to fall asleep in. She wasn't doing anything unusual, just watching the washing machine. But when the drum turned, she glanced up and caught me looking. Not in a dramatic way. No sudden turn, no raised eyebrow. Just a quiet moment where our eyes met. I looked down first. It felt polite. A minute later, she walked over to the change machine near my table. The coins clattered into the tray. "Do these dryers actually work?" she asked, almost casually. "Or do they just pretend to?" Her voice was calm, slightly amused. I looked up. "Depends which one." She tilted her head toward the row near the window. "That one eats quarters," I said. "But it dries things eventually." She smiled. Not a big smile. Just the kind where one corner of the mouth lifts slightly, like she'd heard something she expected. "Good to know," she said. She moved her laundry into the dryer I'd pointed at, brushing a few loose strands of hair behind her ear as she closed the door. I noticed her hands for a second. No rings. I immediately looked away from that thought. A few minutes passed. The dryers started their slow spinning again. Then she came back over. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the chair across from me. I shrugged. "It's public property." That earned another small smile. She sat down and folded a receipt between her fingers while the machines hummed behind us. "You come here every week?" she asked. "Yeah." "You're a student?" It wasn't a question. I blinked. "Is it that obvious?" "You have that look," she said. "What look?" She paused, studying my face like she was deciding how honest to be. "Like your brain's somewhere else most of the time." I laughed under my breath. "Fair." For a few seconds neither of us said anything. Just the dryers turning and someone's phone ringing faintly near the front counter. I caught myself glancing at her hands again as she folded the receipt into a neat triangle. She noticed. Her eyes flicked up. Not accusing, just aware. "So," she said, leaning back slightly in the chair. "What are you studying?" "Architecture." "That explains the staring." "I wasn't," she laughed softly, cutting me off. "I know." Another pause. The dryers thumped once as a pair of jeans shifted inside. Then her machine beeped. She stood up slowly, smoothing her sweater. "Well," she said. I nodded. "Good luck with the quarter eater." She walked back to the dryer, but before opening it, she glanced over her shoulder and looked at me again. Not casually this time. Longer. Carefully. Like she was deciding something. I didn't understand the look then. But about 10 minutes later, when my phone buzzed on the table with a number I didn't recognize, I realized she must have. I stared at the message for a long time before opening it. Unknown number. Just one line. "You forgot your receipt." I looked up immediately. She was still by the dryer, folding a towel slowly like she wasn't in a hurry to leave. There was no receipt on the table. When she glanced back and saw me holding my phone, that same quiet smile appeared again, small, almost private. I typed back. "You mean the one you folded into a triangle?" 3 dots appeared. "Maybe." I looked up again. She was watching the machine spin, but there was something about the way her shoulders moved that told me she was trying not to laugh. That's how it started. Not dramatic. Not romantic in any obvious way. Just messages that didn't really need to be messages. Sometimes it was about laundry schedules. Sometimes about the coffee next door. Once she sent a picture of the dryer with the caption, "Quarter eater strikes again." A week later she brought tea. I was sitting at the same plastic table when she walked in carrying 2 paper cups instead of 1. She placed one in front of me without asking. "Peace offering," she said. "For what?" "For stealing your receipt." I turned the cup slowly between my fingers, feeling the warmth through the cardboard. "Fair trade," I said. "You gave me a mysterious text." That wasn't mysterious. It was a little mysterious. She sat across from me again, folding her arms loosely on the table. "You answered it." I was curious. "Curiosity gets people into trouble," she said lightly. But she didn't look away when she said it. The laundromat was almost empty that morning. Just the soft rotation of machines and the low buzz of fluorescent lights. I watched her wrap the string from her tea bag around the small paper tag, over and over. "You live nearby?" I asked. She nodded toward the street outside. 2 houses down. "Oh, I own the place," she added after a second. "The blue one with the small balcony." Something clicked in my memory. "Wait, the one with the ivy on the fence." "That's the one. You're the landlord." "Landlady," she corrected. I blinked. "You own my building." She tilted her head slightly. "So you're the quiet tenant in the upstairs unit." For a second, neither of us spoke. Something shifted in the air between us. Nothing visible, just awareness. "Small world," I said. "Too small sometimes." She said it casually, but the way her fingers stopped moving around the teabag string told me she'd thought about that before. "Are you married?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes lifted to mine. There was no offense there, just a quiet pause. "No," she said. "Not anymore." "Divorced." She didn't say the word, but it settled into the space between us anyway. I looked down at the tea. 27. 40-something. Landlady. Tenant. My brain started doing the thing it always does, running through possible versions of the future that hadn't happened. One where this stayed normal. One where it didn't. "You're thinking too hard again," she said softly. I looked up. "How can you tell?" "That look." She leaned forward slightly, reaching across the table to straighten the sleeve on my cup where it had slipped down. Her fingers brushed the back of my hand for half a second. Not intentional. Probably. But neither of us moved right away. "I just noticed things," she said quietly. And I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. After that morning, the laundromat stopped feeling like a random place. It started feeling scheduled. Not officially. Neither of us ever said, "Let's meet Sunday again." But somehow we both kept showing up around the same time. Same machines. Same plastic table by the window. Some weeks we talked more. Some weeks we barely did. But the quiet between us didn't feel awkward anymore. Just shared. One Sunday, she was already there when I walked in. Her laundry basket sat on top of a machine, but she wasn't using it. She was just leaning against the table, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she lifted her eyebrows slightly. "You're late." "By 2 minutes." "Still late." I set my basket down beside the washer. "You timed me." She shrugged. "Maybe." I noticed 2 paper cups sitting on the table. "You already got tea." I had a feeling. That small sentence did something strange in my chest. I busied myself loading the washer, trying not to think about why. When I turned back, she was watching me again. Not in a way that felt uncomfortable, just observant. Like she was studying a detail she couldn't quite figure out. "You're quieter than most tenants," she said. "Is that good or bad?" "Depends." "On what?" She didn't answer right away, just slid one of the cups toward me. "On whether quiet means peaceful or lonely." I didn't respond, just wrapped my fingers around the cup and stared at the steam. Across the room, someone dropped a handful of coins into a machine. The clatter echoed for a second. She sat down slowly. "You ever think about moving?" she asked. "From the apartment?" "Yeah." "Not really." "Good." The words slipped out before she seemed to realize she'd said it. She cleared her throat lightly and looked toward the dryers. I noticed the small crease between her eyebrows. "You like having quiet tenants?" I asked. "Something like that." Her voice sounded thinner than usual. And suddenly I understood. Or at least part of it. This wasn't just 2 strangers talking over laundry anymore. There were lines. Tenant. Landlady. 27. 44. Maybe 45. A person's brain fills in those numbers even if nobody says them out loud. You know, I said carefully, if this is weird for you, it's not weird. She said it too quickly. Then she exhaled and leaned back in the chair. It's just, her sentence trailed off. What? She shook her head. Nothing. But her eyes flicked toward my face again, then down to the table, like she was arguing with herself. The washer beeped. Neither of us moved. Finally, she stood up. I should switch this over. I followed her to the dryer without really meaning to, just carrying my basket automatically. We stood side by side while she pulled damp shirts from the machine. The air smelled like detergent and warm cotton. One of the sleeves twisted around her wrist as she lifted it out. Hold this, she said. She handed it to me without waiting. Our hands brushed again. This time neither of us pretended not to notice. The laundromat felt suddenly too quiet. She looked up. Close now. Closer than we'd ever been. Her eyes searched my face like she was trying to confirm something. For a second I thought she might say something, or step back. Instead she stayed exactly where she was. And my brain started filling in the space between us with possibilities that felt dangerous. I could feel her breath when she exhaled. She opened her mouth slightly, like she was about to say my name. Or maybe. Then the front door swung open. Someone walked in loudly, dragging a laundry bag across the floor. And the moment broke. After that day, something changed. Not outwardly. We still met at the laundromat. Still drank tea at the small plastic table near the window. Still talked about ordinary things, broken dryers, noisy neighbors, the coffee shop next door. But there was a new awareness in the room. Like both of us had seen the edge of something. And now we were pretending we hadn't. The first person to disturb the rhythm wasn't either of us. It was a guy from my building. I didn't know his name. Just recognized him from the hallway. Loud footsteps, always talking on the phone. He walked into the laundromat one Sunday and nodded at me. Then his eyes moved to her. Oh, he said casually. Hey, landlord. She smiled politely. Morning. He dumped his laundry into a machine and glanced between us again. You two know each other. The question landed heavier than it should have. I shrugged. Same laundry schedule. Right? But the way he said it felt knowing. Like he'd already decided what it meant. After he left, the quiet felt different. Thicker. She stared into her tea for a while, turning the paper cup slowly between her palms. That's going to look strange, she said finally. What is? Us. I leaned back in the chair. We're drinking tea. You know what I mean. I did. But saying it out loud felt like stepping onto thin ice. So we stop, I said. She looked up quickly. The reaction was instant. Almost sharp. Stop what? This. The word hung in the air. Talking. Sitting. Waiting for each other without admitting it. Her eyes searched my face. You want that? She asked quietly. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because the answer wasn't simple. She watched the silence stretch between us. Then she looked down again. That's what I thought. The machines hummed behind us. Someone's dryer thumped unevenly across the room. I was married for 16 years, she said suddenly. The shift caught me off guard. He left 3 years ago, she continued, voice calm but thinner now. You'd think that would make things simpler. It doesn't. I stayed quiet. She looked at the table as she spoke. When you live alone long enough, you get used to being invisible. Her fingers tapped once against the paper cup. And then someone starts noticing things about you. She glanced at me. Little things. My throat felt tight. I wasn't trying to, I know. Her voice softened. That's the problem. A long pause filled the space between us. The laundromat door opened again, letting in a brief rush of cool air. She stood up slowly. Walk with me for a minute, she said. We stepped outside. The sidewalk was quiet, just the low noise of traffic down the street. The sky was pale gray, the kind of morning that feels unfinished. We walked a few steps without speaking. Then she stopped near the ivy-covered fence she'd mentioned before. Her house. She turned toward me. Close again. Too close for something that was supposed to be casual. You're 27, she said gently. Yes. And I'm 44. She said the number without flinching. I nodded. That doesn't bother you? She asked. I met her eyes. No. Her breath caught slightly. You should think about that answer a little more carefully. I have. Another pause. The wind moved softly through the ivy leaves behind her. "You're my tenant," she said after a moment. "I know. And you're looking at me like—" Her sentence stopped there. Her eyes flicked down to my mouth for half a second, then back up. The air between us tightened. She took one slow breath and asked, very quietly, "Do you even realize what you're doing to me?" After she asked that question, neither of us moved. The sidewalk felt suddenly very small. I could hear the traffic down the street, the faint rattle of the laundromat door opening behind us, but everything around her seemed quieter. "Do you even realize what you're doing to me?" Her voice hadn't been angry. That was the strange part. It sounded tired, honest, like she had finally said something she'd been holding back for weeks. I opened my mouth. But she shook her head gently. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't answer right now." Her eyes stayed on mine for another second, then she stepped back. The distance was small, a single step, but it felt like a door closing halfway. "I need to think," she added quietly. And then she went inside the laundromat. I stood there for a minute longer than I probably should have. The ivy on her fence shifted in the breeze. My brain kept replaying the moment before she stepped back. The way she looked at me. The way the question sounded less like an accusation and more like a confession. But she didn't come back out. So eventually I left. The next Sunday, I still went to the laundromat. Same time. Same plastic table by the window. I even bought 2 teas without thinking. One for me. One for, well, the second cup sat there untouched while my washer spun. I told myself she was probably just busy. Landlord things. House repairs. Weekend errands. But the cup got cold anyway. The Sunday after that, I went again. No sign of her. Her machine along the back wall stayed empty. The third week, I walked in and instinctively looked toward the door like she might appear behind me. She didn't. I tried to act normal. Loaded my laundry. Checked my phone. Folded my receipt into a small square without realizing it. The laundromat felt different without her there. Not lonely exactly. Just unfinished. Like a conversation that got interrupted mid-sentence. Around the 4th week, the guy from my building walked in again. He nodded at me. Then he glanced around the room. "No landlord today." I looked up. "What?" "The woman you sit with," he said casually. "She usually comes Sundays." "Usually." The word hit strangely. "You know her?" I asked. He shrugged. "Sort of. My kid used to go to school with her daughter." "Daughter." The word slipped into the room like a piece of information that had been waiting its turn. "She's got a teenage girl," he added. 17, I think. I nodded slowly. He dumped his clothes into the washer and didn't think about it again. But I did. All the way through the spin cycle. 17. 44. Tenant. Landlady. Daughter almost old enough to be. I stopped that thought before it finished forming. That night, I opened my messages. Her number was still there. The last text she'd sent was a picture of the broken dryer. "Quarter eater strikes again." I typed a message. "Hey, haven't seen you in a while." I stared at it for a long time. Then I added another line. "Is everything okay?" My thumb hovered over the send button. Minutes passed. The little typing box blinked patiently. But something about the silence of the last few weeks felt deliberate, like she had stepped away on purpose. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. Eventually, I closed the message window. The text stayed there, unsent. And the next Sunday, the chair across from me at the laundromat table was still empty. By the 6th Sunday, I stopped bringing 2 cups of tea. It felt unnecessary. The laundromat routine had gone back to what it used to be. Machines humming, people coming and going, no one really noticing anyone else. Just me and my laundry again. But something in me kept expecting the door to open, kept expecting her gray sweater to appear in the reflection of the window. It never did. That afternoon, after I folded the last of my clothes, I walked past the ivy-covered fence on my way home. I had done that dozens of times before without thinking. This time I slowed down. Her house looked the same. Blue siding, small balcony, wind moving gently through the ivy leaves. A light was on in the kitchen. I stood there longer than I meant to. Then I kept walking. 2 steps. 3. Then I stopped again. My brain started its usual argument. "Don't do this. You're her tenant." She stepped away for a reason. But the other part of me, the quieter, stubborn part, kept replaying that moment on the sidewalk. Do you even realize what you're doing to me? Eventually, I turned around. The front path to her door was short, just a few stones leading to a small porch. My hand hovered near the door for a second. Then I knocked. The sound felt louder than it should have. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps inside. The door opened halfway. She stood there in the same gray sweater. Her hair was down this time. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked surprised. Not angry, just surprised. I thought you stopped coming to the laundromat, she said. I didn't. A small pause. I noticed. That surprised me. You weren't there. No. She glanced down at the porch floor briefly, then back up. I figured that might make things easier. Did it? She exhaled softly. No. The honesty of that answer hung between us. The kitchen light behind her cast a soft glow across the porch. I could hear a kettle clicking faintly on the stove inside. I almost texted you, I admitted. Almost. I wrote it. And I didn't send it. She nodded slowly. Good. Why? Because I probably would have answered. Another pause. Not uncomfortable. Just careful. I found out you have a daughter, I said quietly. Her expression shifted. Not defensive, just thoughtful. 17, she said. That changes things. Yes. The word landed simply. I nodded. I figured that's why you pulled away. It's part of it. And the rest. She looked at me for a long moment, like she was deciding how honest she was willing to be. The rest, she said slowly, is that when you walked into that laundromat every Sunday, I started looking forward to it more than I should have. My chest tightened slightly. She leaned against the doorframe. That's not a small thing when you're trying to rebuild a quiet life. I wasn't trying to complicate it. I know. Her voice softened. That's what made it harder. The kettle inside clicked again. Neither of us moved. Then she stepped slightly closer to the doorway, not inviting me inside, but not closing the door either. You're a good man, she said gently. You barely know me. I know enough. The wind moved lightly across the porch. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then I asked the only question that felt honest. So what happens now? She looked at me. Not quickly, carefully. Then she gave a small, tired smile and said quietly, right now. A small pause. We're just standing here. Another pause. Then she reached out and touched my arm briefly. Not dramatic, just human. And she nodded once. After that night, things didn't suddenly become simple. In fact, for a while they became quieter. We didn't start meeting every day. There were no dramatic confessions, no long messages sent late at night. Mostly, life went back to its normal rhythm. But it was a slightly different rhythm now. A week after the porch conversation, I heard a knock on my apartment door. It was early, around 8:47 a.m. When I opened it, she was standing there holding 2 cups. Tea, she said. I blinked. You know I usually drink coffee. I know, she said, handing me the cup anyway. But today felt like tea. The hallway between our apartments smelled faintly like detergent from someone's laundry downstairs. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she leaned casually against the railing outside the stairwell. Your dryer is still broken, she said. I figured. I'll fix it this week. That's very responsible landlady behavior. She smiled. Don't make it weird. I'm not. But we both laughed quietly. And that's how things began again. Not as some big romantic turning point. Just mornings like that. Sometimes we'd run into each other outside when I left for class. Sometimes she'd text about something ordinary, a repair notice, a missing package, the usual landlord things. And occasionally, she'd add something small at the end. A dryer survived 3/4 today. Or tea in the kitchen if you're around. Months passed that way. Slowly, carefully, like both of us were learning how to walk across a bridge without testing how fragile it was. I met her daughter once. She was taller than I expected, headphones around her neck, polite but slightly suspicious the way teenagers often are. This is my tenant, she told her. I nodded. That's the official title, I said. Her daughter raised one eyebrow but didn't ask questions. Later, when the door closed behind her, we both laughed under our breath. Life kept moving. The laundromat on Maple Street closed a few months later. The owner retired and put up a handwritten sign on the door. Thank you for 22 years. When I told her, she just nodded thoughtfully. That place started a lot of trouble, she said. Or solved it. Maybe both. That evening we sat on the small bench outside her house, the one near the ivy fence where we'd stood that day weeks earlier. She had tea. I had black coffee. The street was quiet, the way it usually is just before the sky goes fully dark. You know, she said, watching a car pass slowly. I used to think life after 40 had to be very organized. Meaning, no surprises. I took a sip of coffee. That sounds boring. She smiled. Exactly. A comfortable silence settled between us. Not the careful silence from the laundromat days. A softer one. The kind where neither person feels like they need to fill it. After a while she reached over and nudged my cup slightly so it wouldn't tip off the bench. A small habit. Something she'd probably do without thinking now. I realized then that the tension that used to live between us had changed into something steadier. Not perfect, but real. She leaned back against the bench and looked at me for a moment. You still overthink everything, she said. Probably. But you stayed. I nodded. So did you. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked up her tea and took a slow sip. Then she said softly, some things are worth the trouble. The porch light flicked on above us automatically. And for a moment, sitting there with tea and black coffee between us, it felt like the story had finally finished the sentence it started. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?